Some people wanted me to talk about Bethesda's decision to not give out review copies of their games until the game is out. Some reviewers out there are pissed off about it, but I really don't care. I always buy my games. Well, 99% of the time. I have had a friend provide me with games on the rare occasion, and one time a publisher sent me a key for a game to review, but I already bought the game. But I do believe that reviewers should spend money on their games to review. But more on that in a bit. Bethesda took this course of action because when Doom 2016 was being released, they didn't provide any review copies at all. Doom was a huge success, but anyone can tell you that it's not because they didn't hand out review copies, it's because id Software made a really good game. Not providing review copies is seen as an anti-consumer practice, especially with video games, as it's very difficult to get a refund. Steam being the easiest, while PlayStation is a pain in the ass from what I've heard, and I have no idea about Xbox. I heard Origin is pretty easy as well. Not seeing a review of a game that's coming out and holding off could be damaging to the company, as they only care about the first week or two of sales. So if people are waiting on reviews to go out, then that game is just sitting on the shelves. But we all know that won't happen for the big AAA games, but it can hurt other games if a company decides to forego review copies until after the game is released. This will especially hurt the consumer if the game is buggy or completely broken on release, like Assassin's Creed Unity or Battlefield 4. But then the gaming media still gave those games a good score despite how unpolished they were. I didn't mind review embargoes where publishers didn't allow the gaming media to release their reviews until the game the day was launched. That was beneficial to the consumer, as gaming sites and magazines weren't rushing through games to make sloppy reviews that don't reflect the game's actual quality, because they wanted to be the first one with the review out, allowing them to get a good majority of the traffic and revenue from that traffic by having the first review out. With an embargo, gamers were still able to see those reviews before actually purchasing the game. They could be standing in line and seeing a bunch of 1 out of 10 scores popping up on a game they're about to buy, and then they can get the hell out of Dodge before plopping down that $60. Gaming media outlets hated the embargoes, because it deprived them of revenue at the cost of a sloppy review, as an embargo leveled the playing field for all of them. But I think it still benefited the customer, even if the embargo lifted on the day of release. The idea that Doom sold well because they didn't hand out review copies is completely stupid logic. I can see why they didn't give out copies of Doom, however. The story is pretty much an allegory for fracking, so I can see a bunch of regressive left hipster douchebag game journalists harshly criticizing the game because of it, as they defend the demons from hell protecting their energy source as if the story of Doom was real. But Doom sold well because it was a good game. Jim Sterling talked about this on his Publishers Controlling Game Reviews video, and from his perspective, I'm not going to say he's wrong, because he's pretty much blacklisted or at least graylisted by some publishers for being a wild card, meaning that his review scores are not easily predictable. But he also agreed that on a business perspective, it makes sense to not give out copies to those who cannot be predicted. But he does blame the pre-order culture of the game industry for most of the reasons behind withholding review copies. I can't really empathize with him. I only got a code to review a game once, but it was for a game that I had already bought. He says that he buys most of his games anyway. The last 10 games he reviewed, 3 of them were provided by the publisher, 6 were bought, and 1 was free. He did have a bunch of PlayStation VR games sent to him by Sony along with a headset, and he seems to get a lot of indie games from the publishers. But the big AAA games he seems to have to purchase. 99% of all my game reviews come from games that I purchased, and I think that every reviewer should have to purchase their games before they review them. Reason being is that gaming is an expensive hobby, and getting refunded on a game that's bad isn't as easy as returning a defective item. I remember getting a refund for the first South Park PC game at Walmart because I thought the game disc was defective somehow, and it was also their last copy. But it turns out the game was just a piece of shit. But getting a game for free allows a reviewer to be more lenient on it because they didn't lay down any cash to acquire it. Look at Sonic 06 and Sonic and the Secret Rings. They averaged 5 out of 10 and 6 out of 10 respectively. More than likely, those games were provided by Sega to the review outlets. But if you look at the scores of those who actually had to buy those games, like myself, who gave the games a liquid shit and Bubsy 3D rating respectively, there's a complete difference in scores. Because I had to part with my money to review them, and that's money I cannot get back easily, and that can and should affect a review score. Sonic Boom: The Rise of Lyric had no review copies out. Granted, any Sonic game that comes out needs to be approached with at least cautious optimism, but no review copies for a Sonic game kinda sends the signal that this is gonna suck. No review copies show a lack of faith in the product or says that the game isn't going to be good at all. It's great that some publishers are treating YouTubers as a legitimate source exclusive reviews and promotion for their games. But yet they still seem to want to control the review process by limiting review copies or trying to limit what you can or cannot say or show, like how Activision was doing takedown strikes for showing glitches in one of the Call of Duty games, or how WB Games told YouTubers that they could not talk negatively about Shadows of Mordor. Bethesda not handing out review copies until the day before or day of release seems to be an experiment of sorts. But one thing that will happen is that we'll see a return of the rushed reviews by major gaming media outlets where they're desperate for those clicks, while YouTubers such as myself will get about the same amount of views from our audiences because you go to them because you like the person. Just look at Angry Joe. His reviews have been coming out a few weeks after a game launches and he still gets a lot of views. Why? Because they go to him because of his personality. They like his reviews. They like his style. That's why they go and see him. I don't know how long Bethesda will keep this going. After all, they are one of the few companies that can get away with this due to the cult-like mentality that gamers have for them. We all know that Skyrim's special edition released with a lot of the same bugs the original had, and even a game-breaking one that made a quest unable to be finished. We've seen bugs like Preston Lacey from Fallout 4 relentlessly chase the player and trying to kill him because Preston got in his line of fire or something, until it eventually worked itself out, and the Fallout and Elder Scrolls games feel like they're running on a really outdated game engine. But they can get away with all that for some reason. But Ubisoft can't and no one will, or at least should, let them get away with it now after Assassin's Creed Unity. EA can't and shouldn't be allowed to after Battlefield 4. Same goes for Microsoft because of the whole Master Chief Collection fiasco. I am interested in seeing how far this experiment will run for, and if it'll change anything. I don't think it'll change anything unless Bethesda screws up royally, and when they do and see the lack of sales because they released one broken, unplayable game, I think we'll see this policy of theirs repealed pretty quick.